You've probably heard of the Theater of Despair. It is quite literally the most popular ReZero fanfic out there. And if you haven't, today I'll be going over that. And not only that, but why exactly this fanfic wouldn't work within the main story and why so many fans are wrong in the assumption that it would or wanting it to be within the main story. With all that being said, if you enjoy ReZero, if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And anyways, I'm going to go ahead and just get right into this video. I'd also like to say thank you guys so much for a lot of the support on the last couple of videos. It means the world to me. But yeah, enough of that. Let me just go ahead and get right into this. I want to preface this with saying that this in no way is supposed to be any sort of, shade or disrespect towards the creator of this fanfic. It is a cool idea and it is interesting to see play out, even though I disagree with some of the characters' reactions throughout it. Ultimately though, it is a really cool thing and a really interesting thing, and I could totally surmise how, people would maybe potentially want this within the main story or, see how this would go down. But guys, this video is addressed towards the people who actually want to see this within the main story and think this would be good for the story of ReZero. Now, I could confidently say, as much and as cool as this fanfic is, that this would suck if it actually happened within ReZero. Now, knowing I just said that, Tappei, of course, is going to start Arc 10 with this or something like this being the very first scene, knowing my luck and knowing how he is. But no, really, I don't think this would be a good thing, and that's going to be for a multitude of reasons, which I'm going to go through. First and foremost is going to be the most obvious and most prominent one of all of this, and that is going to be that we saw something like this kind of already play out within the main series, and it was illustrated to us in a bad light and painted as a negative thing, and that is going to be the second trials of Arc 4, aka Subaru's present trials, in which he sees the unspeakable events. Now, this is one of the coolest moments within all of ReZero, and in my opinion, one of the most underrated moments. We get many different interesting cuts and perspectives in which we see the world play out in a scenario where, Subaru has passed due to his own selfish actions and everyone around him is watching. I want you guys to think about the reactions within those scenes and compare them to the reactions, within whatever's going on here, in which we very clearly see Subaru is unable to handle the mental toll of this, unable to handle the mental toll of, everyone seeing him die, everyone seeing him pass, and this wouldn't be something of joy for him or something that he would want. But more importantly, we see the characters' reactions to Subaru dying and, him sacrificing himself. Now, to be fair, the scenarios are definitely different. They don't know about return by death. Obviously they're not sat in a theater all together watching it like it's some sort of movie. And as much as the theater of Malice plays it, it's not some sort of, sorrow pity party for Subaru. A lot of the time, it's burdened with anger, and that's the point. Subaru is not supposed to die. He is not supposed to use return by death. To say it the lightest, Subaru is a bit selfish whenever he uses return by death, and I know that's hard to hear and, take in on a surface level, but really think about it. Minerva, within her critique of Subaru within Arc 4, is exactly right, and this entire thing and this entire plot point right here and the Theater of Despair in general is playing into that idea around Arc 4 and the value of Subaru's life and a lot of the struggles he was going on with at that point within the series ultimately, and what Subaru was having to learn, and that is going to be that it is okay to rely on the people around him. A lot of, if not most of, Subaru's deaths within ReZero could have been averted if Subaru went into things with a level-headed and, was able to rely openly on the people around him and rely on his friends. It plays into one of the major points of ReZero, that being that emotional vulnerability is the key to success and the key to Subaru really not having to lean on return by death in most scenarios. Being honest with himself and being truthful to himself and not having some sort of inflated ego as he does within the end of Arc 3 or, trying to take, the trials for Amelia within Arc 4 and ultimately, we see him run into a wall, try to burden that, mixed with the fact of, trying to stop Elsa at the mansion. So much of the point of ReZero and the other aspect, even though I know people love focusing on, the determination aspect of Subaru and the selfless aspect in the sense of that, oh, well, he never gives up despite, dying over and over again. That's only half of the story. Tappei is trying to portray also that, that mindset is sometimes not always a good thing. And it's almost a sense of false altruism. And that's exactly what Subaru gets critiqued for within Arc 4. And the second trials goes forth and it shows that exactly, being that while Subaru, yes, he did have to die in those moments that are shown, it impacted everybody around them and it left the people around them sad, and it wasn't fair to the people around them, such as, the one where he, stabbed himself in the neck to go back and save Rem, and you see Amelia sitting there crying and, saying, he promised, and so on and so forth. And Felix is also upset seeing that how little value Subaru has within his own life. So while yes, undoubtedly the selfless side of Subaru is one of the coolest things about ReZero, in my opinion, something that is just as cool is the Subaru that learns to rely on the people around him. And that's what makes Subaru such a great character, in my opinion, and what ultimately makes him so dangerous throughout the story of ReZero. Not, Return by Death as a vessel itself, but when Subaru is really able to understand that feeling of, relying on everybody around him, he inspires people, and he grows such a contagious and, determining personality in which he inspires people to act just as selfless as him, and, have a mutualistic relationship with the people around him in which, they'll go forth and sacrifice themselves for him, and he'll do the same thing. The theater of despair is almost to a sense, reflective of what Subaru was kind of trying to go for within arc 3 of the series. In my opinion, it plays into that argument that Subaru and Emilia had a lot. The theater of despair is something that an arc 3 version of Subaru would love to have, would die to have, because that version of Subaru is somebody who wasn't doing all of this stuff for Emilia's sake, but was really doing this for his own sake in hopes of, getting some sort of moniker or title, or trying to fulfill a role and identity that he never had within his previous world, that being a, hero within this world. And we see so much of that false heroism. And, that argument really stems from the basis that Emilia states, "I'd never asked you to do any of this for me. I never asked you to go through all of this. You did this on your own," which, being forth for Subaru is a very self-sacrificing thing, but it's self-sacrificing for all of the wrong reasons. It's not self-sacrificing for Emilia's case, it's self-sacrificing for Subaru's case. And I really don't want to run on that point for too long, because I don't want to paint this video as, Subaru is just some selfish bad guy, and all his actions and, deaths up until that point were, within the wrong point of view and the wrongdoing, but a good amount of them were. And it's undeniable for the fact that the earlier arcs of Subaru had a lot of, wrong qualities. A lot of Subaru's actions and what the series tries to tell you, at least earlier on, are selfish in the sense that, his actions could be deemed greedy, in the sense he wants to take all the pain and all the burdening himself and not have anyone else have to suffer. And another point I really want to tackle is the entire concept of other characters knowing Subaru can, return by death is a very dangerous one within itself that Tappei looks to highlight multiple times throughout the series. Whenever any sort of character gets any sort of idea that Subaru can reset or loop, they almost to a point start using Subaru as, a martyr, and using him to dictate such things. And we see this no better again than in arc 4 with Roswell, in which the second Roswell realizes that Subaru has, a looping ability, he uses Subaru for his own benefactory, and henceforth goes ahead and does such things. I don't put it past the Emilia camp to do such a thing to Subaru if they knew something was going on like this. But I think people overestimate how much the other camps within the series care about Subaru outside of, like Julius and, the people that have high respect for them. A lot of the characters within ReZero, just like Subaru, and this really does play into their parallels and such, are very emotionally immature characters. And especially earlier on in the series, if they knew Subaru could do such a thing, would without a doubt, I feel, at least in my opinion, a lot of them try to use it. Again, that's why Satella, hides the fact that Subaru can't tell return by death from anyone. It's really such a double-edged sword. People only, they get so caught up on the suffering half of it and that aspect of it. I feel as if people forget to look at, the fact that Tappei kind of tries to paint this also as a blessing. He tries to shine a light and a dark side of return by death, because while Subaru is stuck in some sort of loop, essentially, he can't progress forward, it also gives Subaru the chance to develop and, do things such as that. But I mean, yeah, those right there are really my main points. I do want to clarify that I think the fanfic is a super cool idea in theory, and I think it's something very interesting to look at. And honestly, knowing Tappei and how he really does like to play with controversial plot devices and controversial plot decisions, as we know, with web novel leaders, with what he did with arc 9 and, other later arcs like arc 6, using very controversial ideas. I don't put him past him to do it something like this and somehow make it good and go completely against everything I say. But this overall is really just my opinion on the matter. And, this is addressed towards the fans out there who want to see a scene like this within the main story, want to see something like this go down, this sort of, pity party for Subaru because he died over and over again, in which, like I said, in my opinion, is very reflective of Subaru's own actions within arc 3 of the series, in which, he's screaming at Emilia going, "Oh, well, I did all of this for you. I saved you here. I did this here," and so on and so forth. And I feel like it's kind of just rooted within a sense of, I don't know, I'm looking for a word and I can't find it. And I think a lot of the characters deep down would have a much more, second, opinion on the matter and really just try to go at Subaru in some different way that would, benefit themselves. Because, like I said, a lot of the ReZero characters are extremely emotionally immature. Don't even get me started on Felix. That guy is insane. Same thing could be said with Puck. Literally every single character within ReZero, almost every single character within ReZero, is doing something for a goal they're trying to achieve, whether that be Puck, Heinkel, Felix, Roswell, so on and so forth. These guys are selfish. Don't let them fool you with, their reactions and such. But anyways, with all of that being said, that's going to be about it for the video. I just want to thank you guys for all of the support lately. I want to clarify one more time. This in no way is supposed to be hate towards the creator of this fanfic. I'm not trying to hate on the fanfic. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's interesting to see go down, but this, like I said, is directed at people who want to actually, see this within the main series. And don't tell me that these people aren't out there, because I've seen them in comment sections. I've seen them. I've seen people be like, ReZero needs to implement this. Don't get in my comments talking about some, oh, well, no one actually wants it within the main series. Bro, you're lying, bro. You're lying. It's like the same people who want, all the if stuff and Subaru to be, tough, like how he is in the ifs in the main series. Like, these people are out there, bro. Just because you haven't seen them, I'm telling you, bro, they're out there. Anyways, though, bit of a tangent there. Thank you guys for watching, and peace.